aware of that. My name is Ginny Lupi, and I'm the director of the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the second of 5 community conversations about reopening arts organizations in the middle of a pandemic. And we're so happy to have all of you here. I'd like to take a moment and recognize the Commissioner of Natural and Cultural Resources, Sarah Stewart, who is with us today. And I don't think that we have any arts counselors with us, but we do have staff, Arts Council staff. And so Emily Killinger is behind the Arts Connect and H, in front of the Arts Connect and H banner. And Emily is our tech person extraordinaire when it comes to Zoom. And so hopefully if anybody has any problems, she will be able to help us with those. I also see Kayla Schweitzer from our team, and she doesn't have her video on. Carrie Johnson from our team is here as well. And Carrie just turned on her video. You see Kayla just gave us a thumbs up. So we are going to get started. Just some ground rules. If you're not speaking, please make sure that you are muted. And then if you have questions for the panel, please type them into the chat. We will take questions that way, depending on how many people we end up with today. We had about 30 registered, which is terrific. So, we're going to get started. And what I'm going to do first is just introduce our panel. And so first up today will be Andy Bullock. And he's a traditional artist who has been associated with the Mount Kearsarge Indian Museum for 35 years. A founding board member, he taught traditional native arts at the museum and worked on collections development, restoration, and conservation for many years before becoming executive director in 2018. Andy received his BA in Native Studies and Anthropology from Trent University in Ontario and has taught traditional Native arts there, the University of Ontario, Canadian Canoe Museum, Fleming College, and the Halliburton School of Design in Ontario. Jane Bard started her career as an elementary school teacher. She's been with the Children's Museum of New Hampshire, formerly the Children's Museum of Portsmouth, since 1994. She was the education director for 18 years before taking the helm as museum president in 2013. Over her tenure, she played a key role in the museum's physical and programmatic growth, including a host of outreach programming for at-risk students, the New Hampshire Maker and Food Fest, the STEAM Innovation Lab, and a new outdoor space for messy art, love messy art, and science exploration that's currently under construction. It's called the Play Patio, and it'll open next spring. Andrew Pinard is a full-time performer presenting magic, comedy, and variety throughout the Northeast and around the globe. He's also the founder and executive artistic director of Hatbox Theater, a small performing arts venue in Concord. He has extensive experience as a teacher, director, designer, administrator, and consultant. He served as an elected official in many capacities from 2006 to 2020, including 12 years as a school board member. We honor you, Andrew. There, at the Kearsarge Regional School District, he was instrumental in the 2015 design and renovation of the high school auditorium. He regularly consults for theaters and venues throughout the region and beyond in the areas of magic, lighting design, directing, systems development, and facility design. In 2017, Andrew was awarded the Vision and Tenacity Award at the New Hampshire Theater Awards. Reagan Messer is a native of Atlanta and has been with MoCo Arts since 2002, first as a teacher, then artistic director of dance, and now executive director. Under Reagan's leadership, MoCo saw increased student enrollment and revenue, which led to the outgrowing their facility. He led the organization through a capital project for a new state-of-the-art 17,000 square foot facility in downtown Keene in 2018. And if you haven't been there, you really need to visit. During his performing career, Reagan was a Boston ballet soloist and danced as a guest artist throughout the United States, South America, and New Zealand. While dancing at Boston Ballet, he gained arts management experience by directing and producing ballet galas in Atlanta, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and Vermont. He's currently vice president of the board of directors for North Atlanta Dance Theater and served as a founding board member of the Keene Housing Kids Collaborative. And last but not least, Nicki Clarke has served as executive director of Capital Center for the Arts since 2007. Most recently, CCA acquired and restored the historic Concord Theater, creating a second flexible venue, the Bank of New Hampshire Stage, where we mounted the Governor's Arts Awards last year. Prior to the pandemic, programming at the Chubb Theater and the Bank of New Hampshire Stage grew to 350 shows and events each year. Nicki discovered her passion for the arts as a student at Springfield College. After completing a master's degree at Harvard, she went on to serve as executive director of the Vermont Arts Council and the New York State Council on the Arts. She made her way to Concord and the CCA after serving as director of development at Cushing Academy. So welcome to our incredible panel with lots of experience and lots of things to share. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Andy Bullock, who can talk about what's happening at the Mount Kearsarge Indian Museum.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting us to this panel today. I really appreciate the support. I think, as with most of our panelists, arts can be a very lonely place, and when you superimpose the pandemic on top of that, it becomes even more lonely and more overwhelming. So I certainly do appreciate all of the support that we've received through the New Hampshire Arts Council and all of the agencies that have stepped up and realized how important arts are in New Hampshire. And it's certainly been very supportive of our organization. Like all of the organizations, each one of us has unique challenges as far as managing our way through the pandemic. And when we are typically a seasonal organization, open from May through October, and the pandemic hit right at the very beginning of our planning season, where we had our Founders Day event, which is our single biggest funding event of the year, which immediately became canceled, followed by virtually all of our other workshops and events that are so important to our constituents. Native peoples in New Hampshire have certainly been very supportive of the museum. And one of the things that has surprised me since I came to the museum is a lot of people don't realize that there are still Native people living in New Hampshire and assume that they have been dead for 200 years. So it's really important for us not just to reach out to every third grade class that comes to the museum for that initial education, but also to realize that we are a vital voice throughout New England to help not tell the story, not tell people how Native people think, but to welcome people into that circle where they can engage with Native thought and contemporary issues like missing and murdered Indigenous women. So we think it's so important that all of our programming supports those events where we can invite people to come to our museum and not only have an experience with a world-class collection of art, but engage with conversations throughout the spectrum. So it was very challenging where most of our events were canceled, and a lot of Native communication is an oral tradition. So here we are typically very engaged with other people, and to not be able to have that physical face-to-face interaction was particularly devastating for the Native community, I think. So persevere, we did like arts people do, and we did then reach out to change events so that instead of having our physical Founders Day event, we transformed it into a virtual event where we had a campaign where we engaged with people and explained our plight so that they could help us in being creative to support that. Same with our powwow, which has certainly become one of the biggest powwows in the Northeast, and typically engages 250 participants from across New England and invites 2,500 or 3,000 people in the weekend, to within a couple of weeks turning that into a virtual event that we really were very proud of, because it touched on all of the important things that powwow tends to do, including dance and music and poetry and oral traditions like storytelling. So I'm particularly proud of the efforts that our staff put forth to deliver some of those programs. And I think that it really speaks well to artists in general. So I'm very happy to have been part of the task force, kind of looking at some of the different challenges of reopening the arts here in New Hampshire. And it's been quite an education for us, and we certainly appreciate that encouragement. Thank you, Jenny.
So Andy, before we move on, I have a question for you, just in terms of, since you reopened, how has your attendance been at the museum? And how are people responding to, the procedures that you've put in place?
Right. So we ultimately opened July 1st instead of May 1st. And as was suggested, we did an online option so that people could schedule tours. And so we came up with a schedule so we would be able to accommodate groups up to 10 people. And we tried to space them at 15-minute increments so that they could then have kind of an opportunity to go through the galleries at their own pace. I think that our admissions are probably half of what we would have ordinarily done, and that's excluding the special events like powwows. So, but just looking at the regular daily admissions, I think our admissions are about half. But what I have realized is that those people who are coming are very passionate visitors, and they're really looking for ways to support us in this pandemic. So it's been very encouraging.
That is great. Okay, next up is Jane Bard from the Children's Museum of New Hampshire. Jane, you need to unmute.
I was about to do it and I'm like, oh, started talking. So yes, echoing thank you once again for having us. It's great to have these conversations. I'm a fast talker, so I'll do my best to impart as much information as quickly as possible for you, Ginny. So we closed the museum in mid-March like everything else, and we actually just reopened to the public in September. Right after we closed though, we did have to, as many other organizations had to do, furlough a majority of our staff, keeping essential staff on at reduced hours. We received the PPP money and were able to bring folks back for an 8-week period when we really ramped up looking at new ways to meet our mission in this new world. So we jumped right in and started creating a lot of online content. Our events went virtual. We ended up creating 63 different educational videos that were put out via social media, websites, other means to teachers, schools, our members, anyone could access them for free. And we've had, I think the last count, we had over 30,000 views of those 63 videos. We normally host the New Hampshire, you mentioned the New Hampshire Maker and Food Fest. That was supposed to be at the end of June. We postponed it till the end of August. made the difficult decision for that to go virtual. But we ended up having participation by 42 different makers of all kinds, including performances, including artists, including maker spaces. And so the 42 makers that participated, we ended up having over 7,000 people participate virtually in MakerFest, which is higher than our normal in-person attendance of about 1,400 to 1,600 people. So, you know, we're always trying to look at the bright side of everything we're doing. So we've seen some success in that way. But the big question for us, and I know we're really here to talk about reopening, is we're a hands-on museum, right? Like all children's museums, science centers, anyone with hands-on components, it's not our time to to shine as far as having those experiences. So we really took our time and watched. We belong to the Association of Children's Museums and watched to see what the best practices were for museums around the country as they reopened. When we opened in September, we did so we decided to open at a 10% capacity. So our normal building capacity is 500 visitors. We saw in the last fiscal year 110,000 visitors in 1 year. So we're talking taking 500 and something people down to no more than 50 visitors in the museum at any one time. And we made that decision because we wanted people to be very comfortable when they came back to the museum. Thank goodness for organizations stepping up, businesses stepping up, New Hampshire State Council and the Arts giving us some unrestricted dollars, and the gopher money from the state of New Hampshire, because that was a huge weight off our shoulders, knowing that no matter what, we are going to survive this. And we can take a chance and open up in September, knowing that even if we reach our capacity at two sessions a day, a morning session and an afternoon session, people have to pre-register online, and maxing it out at 50 people, that's paying our hourly staff to be there, and it's not really touching our other operating expenses, but we're here for those people who want and need the museum at this time. And that's what we're finding. The people who are coming back are people who desperately missed us and desperately feel isolated. They don't feel like they have the community that they had before, the community of support. They're worried about their children not having the same social experiences or access to resources in the community that will really help them grow and learn. So people are coming back with tears in their eyes, just so thankful that we're open, even at that capacity. We've taken anything we can't clean off the floor. So it's sort of sad that, you know, there are no more puppets, there are no more costumes. So we've had to eliminate things that we couldn't safely clean. But we've tried to enhance them with other experiences and scavenger hunts. And we have a story walk in the park with, where families can take a story, read the story, anyone in the community read the story, and they all involve movement as well. And we are still continuing with our online content. So offering as much as we can online and morphing our other experiences online. As far as the number of visitors we're seeing, we're averaging about 25 people per time slot right now. I anticipate that will pick up once the weather deteriorates, because it's been so beautiful out. And we're only open right now Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we're going to do private play dates on Sundays starting at the end of October. We did that because we wanted to have the ability to expand if we see the demand growing, but we also didn't want to overwork our limited staff, because we still have the majority of our staff are still furloughed. And those of us who are working are all working at 40 to 70% time. So, you know, I'm happy to answer questions about all of the logistics, but, you know, we have the electrostatic sprayer backpack that we use. We take every manipulative that people touch off the floor after every exhibit and deep clean everything. So we feel like we're being as safe as we can, and we're here for those families who are looking for that experience.
Fantastic. So, you know, I have a question about the online experiences, particularly the Maker Faire. Mm-hmm. You said you had 7,000 visitors online. Were they coming from far afield?
They were, because once again, people will share information, and then we really, that's absolutely correct. That you're seeing a farther reach. And the same thing with those 63 videos I mentioned, that anyone can access those. So teachers are sharing them with their teachers' friends from other parts of the state. We also, another thing we did is we normally have a traveling library program in the summer, and we were doing Engineer a Fairy Tale was the theme this summer. And so we couldn't go to them, but instead we created 5 online videos with like, help Jack make a parachute to jump down the beanstalk, or make a wall for Humpty Dumpty so he won't fall down. But we had these creative videos, and we created 1,100 kits of materials that families could pick up at 30 different libraries throughout the state and bring them home to do these challenges on their own. So I just think, for us, and I'm sure everyone is thinking similarly, it's just ways of doing business that we can really continue and flourish in ways that we might not have had to in the past, or even considered doing in the past. But it's a new world right now, so whatever we can do to still be there as a resource and make it work for our institutions.
That's right. Excellent. Thank you, Jane. And next we have Andrew Pinard from Hatbox Theater.
Thank you, Ginny, and thank you everyone for attending. We are in a similar circumstance. We are a 100-seat venue that programs over 200 events every year for over 7,000 people. And that's produced by hundreds of local artists. All of our work is locally grown performing arts, which insulated us in some ways, because a lot of these artists this may not be their full-time job. This is something that they do to express themselves. And we shut down on March 16th and didn't reopen until July 24th. I too had the opportunity to serve on the task force subcommittee to look at the guidelines for reopening. And part of our concerns, myself particularly, were for the artists. A lot of the approach of the guidelines that we saw were about protecting the public, and less so the people who are necessarily working in the environment or producing things. So we have not pivoted in the way that some other live performing arts organizations have to try to go to online streaming, in part because of a concern that the end result that people were experiencing is not necessarily reflect what we do live. And we don't want that to have a negative impact on future benefits. But we certainly have looked at how we work. And it really, the biggest thing that has impacted us, since we've reopened, we've produced 3 full runs of shows, a bunch of series performances, comedy, both stand-up comedy, improv comedy, and magic. But we've also done a series of performances, like we just closed a production of Love Letters, which I'm sharing a picture with you now. This was done on our performance space. But our biggest challenge that we're finding is confidence. And confidence not just in how we do business, but how we make decisions. That I've expressed to Senator Shaheen and Governor Sununu and a number of other elected officials that we're not getting the information that we really need to be able to plan and program and commit the capital. And in fact, I have a whole list of C words that I would love to run down because I think they impact people. Confidence being the biggest one. For us, we have producers. They have to be confident that they can produce a show and at least break even. Some of them are not trying to make a living from this, but it's a very real service and a very real important aspect to our community, and they want to make sure that they will be able to continue to do it. So it's long term. We have our consumers, our audience members, who want to feel confident that it's safe to return to a space. And as you all know, New Hampshire has such a very high demographic in terms of age that, we are at a 20 to 40% potential seating capacity. But when we opened on July 24th, we were averaging 16 tickets per performance, and that's dropped down now to around 10 per performance, which is very hard. Now, we don't have any paid staff, so we didn't have access to the PPP. We're also a sole member LLC. We're really a cooperative venue. None of us get paid, myself included. But having access to resources from the state, we received about 17% of our ask, as opposed to maybe some of the not-for-profits who were able to receive a little more from the state for lots of good reasons. But it comes down to confidence cash, calendar. When can we reopen? You know, the cash side is where our revenue sources are. What contributions are we getting? Good thing is we've seen an uptick in contributions. When people come to see a show, they often tip a little extra in if we have, you know, the bucket out for contributions. People are doing that. They're buying memberships before their memberships expire. They're buying a membership level that's higher than they normally do. But we still need to know whether we have enough capacity. That's another C in terms of what we can do with the staff that we have that fills our mission and gives the kind of qualified experience that we want people to have. Will we have the capital we need to be able to go forward, especially if things, we see a downturn and we have to shut down. Communications, how to handle our communications capability to make sure that people know what's happening and what they can get involved with. You know, when it comes down to it, our job is to create community, and we do it one story at a time through performance. In our particular circumstance, through live performance. We may have to look in the spring at finding outdoor experiences, but the people who produce in our space want to produce in our space because we provide a specific type of experience that they're used to, or that allows them to work in a particular level. So, you know, we're serving not only ticket holders who pay almost 100% of our revenue. We don't have other funding streams. So if we have to produce things that people want to come and see, or didn't know they wanted to come and see, and they're intrigued by it, and then provide them with a clear experience that reflects their expectations and satisfies them. So, you know, again, our biggest struggle really, and I'm sure all of the not-for-profits and for-profits alone, are whether we're going to have the capital, the money to be able to continue. If we have to shut down, Hatbox is shutting down for 2 weeks right now, with the exception of series shows, mainly because we didn't have enough producers who were ready to produce shows. We did 2.5 months of shows. We have a 2-week window, and now we're moving on. Also, Hatbox normally only produces 1 show a year, and this coming season, we're producing 6. And we're not doing that because we necessarily want to, but it's because the resources that are available of the locally produced organizers aren't ready to step up and commit to those types of things. So we're cautious, and that's the last C word that I'm going to use, and then I'll throw it back to Ginny, is that we're cautiously optimistic because there are audiences who are coming out. There are people reaching out asking for us to maybe provide some information, some remote experiences that they can view. So while we did not pivot immediately to doing live streamed performances, we are trying to provide an avenue for our artists and our audiences to still participate in stories, but things that are really designed for this hybrid experience. And it's taken us a little time to figure out where we're at with that. And our hope is we'll be able to weather the storm and get through and get back to a new normal. But really, my biggest thing that I'd love is confidence in the information that's given to us by our elected officials, because I feel like we're not getting enough information to make prudent fiscal decisions. So thank you, Ginny, and thank you all for coming and participating.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks so much. Next up, Reagan Messer from MoCo Arts in Keene.
Okay, hopefully we don't have any more technical issues. I'm on my phone now. The servers are still out. I was trying to get back up on my computer, but thanks for having me. Yeah, we're a multi-arts education organization, and we really focus on kids from 18 months through 18 years of age, basically through high school. We do have adult classes through our dance program, but our main focus is dance and theater classes, and our summer and vacation camps really have multi-arts aspect to it. When this hit in March, we had to move quickly. We were in the middle of our spring semester, also with the start of performances coming up, our end of the year performances for our different classes and different programs. We knew we were going to be down for 3 weeks with the schools canceled. So what we did quickly was decided to create videos with our teachers for every class. So we created 2 videos for every class over those 3 weeks and sent them out to our students to participate in at home. That was 160 videos we sent out over those 3 weeks. At that point, we also knew that we would not be returning in 3 weeks. You know, the timetable then was talking at least 8 weeks, and we were even giggling at the 8 weeks, unfortunately. But we started looking at how do we keep our kids engaged? How do we keep a sense of normal life for them. You know, the world's crashing down around them as they see it. They don't understand it, especially little ones. High school students are looking at end of the year coming up, especially seniors, and they're seeing their whole senior year just fall apart. So what we did was we shifted to streaming, which many did, and we started streaming all of our classes live from our studio. I mean, this required us to put up some capital to get all the equipment to make sure we had 50-inch TV screens in every studio so the teachers could actually see each student instead of like scrolling through on a laptop or an iPad. We had to make sure the sound quality was good, that when the music was playing, they could hear the teachers. We ran everything through mixers. So sound was running through mixers. We had headsets on. So, and it was working. Obviously, some families with their internet issues, but we controlled the internet problem on our end very well. I say that as today as we're having problems here. So hopefully it straightens out before classes today. But with that, we had to, unfortunately, we had an April vacation camp we had to cancel. That was for 4-year-olds through 12-year-olds. While we could stream an hour class of dance or theater, hour and a half of dance or theater, it's hard to run a day camp for 6 hours to kids. We just couldn't wrap our heads around it quick enough on how to do it. So we had to cancel that. We also at the time were coming up with performances, and we ended up canceling 9 performances for the kids over the 3 programs between end of March and middle of June. Obviously, they all took it hard, especially seniors. You know, their whole senior year just evaporated in front of them. But for us, with those cancellations, we saw about a $60,000 loss right away, really quickly at the start of this. Obviously, we applied for PPP funding. We did get that. That helped to offset that. During that time, we were keeping all staff on board. We have 8 full-time staff, and the rest are part-time teachers and front desk. We were able to keep everybody on. And as we moved into summer started to change some, but not much. We have a CAKE, which is Creative Arts at Keene summer camp for 3rd grade through high school. We have over 100 kids a day at that camp. We saw no way to make it happen. So we shifted to online very quickly. It became a different program, but it allowed us to have students from Scotland. We had teachers from California. So, you know, that was a positive. And the whole experience was great. Our staff did an amazing job putting that together. But, you know, we saw revenue down by 78% because at that time, people are streamed out. The kids were streaming in school. They were streaming through the spring. Everybody's like, we want to be back in person. You know, during that, we also had to cancel their 3 shows at the end of that camp, which we were able to do the shows, just not live. We ended up doing a straight play, 2 performances of that live through Zoom. And then we did the musical, recorded it, and streamed it because there was just no way to make a musical work on Zoom, even though people are out there telling you you can do it. Well, you can do it with a lot of editing and a lot of expensive equipment. But it was a good test for us to be able to test what we were going through for the fall and what we thought we were going to see in the fall. Then we had Cupcake, which is our younger version of CAKE, which is 4-year-olds through 3rd grade. We can't stream them. We knew we couldn't. It opened up so camps could open up and we put into place protocols and procedures to enter the building. Cleaning costs have gone through the roof. Cleaning time has gone through the roof from what our normal budget is. Everybody on staff cleans, including me. Our cleaners, everything. I could tell you Saturday, I mopped over 12,000 square feet of floors just because it was one of those days that I had to step in and do it with our schedules because our cleaners, like, we can't do all of this. This is just, we got other places we clean as well. So it's kind of all hands on deck from our staff, from screening to cleaning to teaching to things like this. So, but as we went to in-person for Cupcake, usually we see 45 to 50 kids a week on that. We started off at 6 and we're like going, okay. And we kept the kids to 8 kids per classroom and outdoor space. So they had an indoor classroom and an outdoor space, same teachers, same kids all day. The kids weren't mixing. The first week, 6, no problem. But as the weeks went, we got up to our last couple of weeks between 25 and 30 kids. It's a big hit for us. We were down by about 60% of our revenue, but we were back in person. Families were excited to see that. We were still waiting for some that said streaming doesn't work. We'll be back when we're in person. Not all of them came back. understandably, they were cautious. We also had our summer dance classes running in the evening. We started off with a streaming model for that, trying to figure out under the camps, we follow camp guidelines, but under dance, we have to follow the health and fitness guidelines. And performances, we're following performance venue guidelines. We're following, like in our organization, about 4 or 5 different sets of guidelines, the way our organization is set up. So we had to figure and wrap our heads around how do we bring them back in safely and get back to in person. We figured it out. End of July, we brought them back in for our last 3 weeks of summer classes, but we had a hybrid model of in-person and streaming in case families weren't comfortable coming back. Teachers had to learn how to deal with an in-person classroom and a streaming classroom at the same time, which after my first day of teaching, I was like, whoa, this is difficult. But we talked with each other. The more teachers that were in teaching, we started bouncing ideas off of each other and figured it out. And we delivered a great product, we think. But, starting streaming, kids were still tired of streaming. We were down probably, we came in down about 20% of our revenue on the summer for classes. So that's, that wasn't too bad. We were happy with that. Our fiscal year ended August 31st. So, the toll COVID took on us overall was about $157,000 loss on the year off of just over a $1 million operating budget. The good thing about it is others have talked about the donors from the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, the Gopher Loans, our individual donors foundations. We came in $40,000 over our projected donor budget on the year. People were like, how can we help? We want to make sure we see MoCo through this. MoCo has to come out the other side of this. And during this time, obviously, when we got through the PPP loans, we have had to furlough 1 of the 8 seniors or full-time staff members we have. No one on our senior staff has had to been furloughed. Luckily, we've not had to have any pay cuts. Our teaching staff is intact. They have lost some classes because we've had to combine classes where we can. Some of our costumers are not seeing work in the fall because of the shows, the way we're approaching it. So as we start into the year, looking at the future, we had the budget starting 9/1. We really looked at our budget to be hit for fall. We didn't look beyond into spring and summer because it's a budget. The board's like, I convinced them we can come back to it. We can make changes to it. But we're projecting for the fall. We were projecting about 30% down from our normal fall time being back in person and still with the streaming options for families that aren't comfortable for health reasons or other reasons. But we were projected to be down about 30% from our normal year, and we're actually coming in right at that number. So we were like, wow, we got some numbers right in this. We were like, yoo-hoo, let's see if we can keep doing this. But our fall performance season gets tricky. We still, with the guidelines, can't really find a way we can do it, but our black box theater seats between 116 and 145. It just doesn't make sense to bring in, only a few, and we just can't figure out how to do it safely in the way we want to do it. So we're going to be streaming. We're going to record all of our performances for theater shows, whether it's straight plays or musicals, and we're going to stream them. We're expecting probably about a 90% loss in revenue on that, just because we know a family that might come see their child perform 3 times is going to buy 1 streaming thing. But we hope that their families across the country or other areas will buy in, and grandparents, aunts, uncles will buy the streaming link and see them. But the big hit to us this fall is our dance program does a biannual production of the Nutcracker. We actually alternate every year with the Colonial Theater here in Keene on Nutcracker. And this was our Nutcracker year. We have over 60 kids on stage in some scenes at one point. We saw there was no way we could do this and safely do it. The only option is that we do auditions and we take smaller cast. We've never done that at MoCo. Every kid that auditioned gets a role. No one gets cut. Everybody's in the show. We said it would be a bigger hit to us as an organization mentally and to the public if we said, okay, we're going to go with smaller cast and cut kids and not allow them to participate than just cutting the entire production. The best thing about this is our families have supported us 150% through this. They've praised us and thanked us time and time again for finding every way to keep their kids involved. And I think the proudest thing for us is that, I know for me, hearing it from several parents, which might not be a good thing, but they said, we're not sending our kids back to live school yet. And I said, but you're sending them to us. And they go, yes, we trust you guys 150% that you're going to keep our kids safe. And so that hit home to us, that our families really care about us and our community cares about us. And they know that we're looking out for them and are going to figure this out, whatever it is. So I think we're all in for a bumpy ride for a while, but you know, I can say we're blessed. We've had the support and been able to really manage this without too bad of losses compared to what I've seen other organizations have. So.
Thank you so much, Reagan. Thank you. And on now to Nicki Clarke from Capital Center for the Arts. And Nicki, you let me know when you want me to show the photographs that you have sent me.
Sure. Hopefully I will remember that. Hello, everyone, and thank you for everybody for attending. And it is really fascinating hearing all the threads through the stories, all the points that are the same, and then, of course, the uniquenesses for each kind of organization that's there. We at the Capital Center for the Arts are a 501c3 organization now with 2 venues. Our year of 2019 into 2020 was going like gangbusters because we had opened our brand new facility in June of 2019, and we had club scenes going every weekend, and I had my opera lovers coming to watch the Met Opera on Saturday afternoons, and we had all of our big shows going on in the Chubb Theater, which seats 1,300. And so we thought we were definitely having the best year ever, and we were going to be breaking our attendance records and our revenue records. And then the calendar went into 2020, and I heard about this little virus, but didn't pay too much attention. But what really grabbed my attention was certainly when the major concert producer Live Nation pulled all of its shows off the road. Because as a presenting theater, we are all about booking all of those touring artists that are out there crisscrossing America. And we do everything from Broadway to comedy to rock bands to dance concerts, you name it. We are in every variety of these kinds of touring artists' productions. So I really felt like we just fell off a cliff. I always start that way, it just fell. And we were in free fall because within 3 days, we lost, either it was canceled or was postponed every single show that was booked in our theater from that entire spring all the way through a good part of this fall. They were just gone. So in trying to cope with that, we obviously had to look at our expenses because we had no more revenue. And we are an organization that lives off about 70% of our revenue comes from the stages, from the productions, from the rental events that we have, all of that. We do dance competitions. We try to keep that place really, really busy. All of that was gone. So we really had to do something quickly. We did lay off our occasional part-time, 22 occasional part-time workers who come in for events specifically. And we immediately put our staff on the job share program so that all of us took a 20%, I took a 25% cut in pay, and we were able to hold on to all of our full and permanent part-time people until the beginning of May. And then at that point, there just wasn't any revenue, and everyone thought this might be a quick event, but it wasn't going to be. So we are down to a staff now of just 8 people. And through all this, we were very much engaged, and certainly we've lived off our PPP money, and we were very engaged in the appeal to making the appeal to the Gopher on relief funding for the arts. My staff was very engaged in that, along with serving on the reopening task force. In the in the end, we figured out as we sort of hit a place where we could think about, well, what can we do? How can we pivot? What is it that we can do? Our dear friends over at the Concord Community Music School said, what about doing some performances outside? And very clearly the message was that doing things outside was a whole lot safer than doing things inside a building. So that's what we did. And we did a series of 6 outdoor performances with regional, local singer-songwriters. They have this wonderful little outside stage that's connected to a city park. And we were limited to 50 people. So it didn't, and we, on all of the tickets that we sold, all of that money went directly to pay the performers because we know they have been really suffering and not being able to earn money. So we did this really as a community benefit, and it was great. And certainly we were hearing from our dear supporters and people who really believe in the Capitol Center for the Arts. And over the course of the rest of that fiscal year, without really having a fundraising campaign, we brought in another $64,000, which was just wonderful, just these gifts, because we certainly needed it just to help us keep going. We were very happy that that Outdoor 6 series, then we continued it through September. We just finished up this weekend, and we featured actually faculty members of the Concord Community Music School. So it is wonderful, and I've heard lots of other organizations as well, you know, finding those interesting partnership activities. And the other group that we have partnered with very recently was our friends at the League of New Hampshire Craftsmen. They and we together put on Capitol Arts Fest, which was the first time we invited everybody back downtown. And we had socially distanced set of wonderful white tents that had the craft artists in it. And then at the far end of that was an outdoor stage. And because of the wonderful Guile Trust, which is a trust of money for performances that have to be given free to the community, the Guile committee allowed us to take their funding and use it on this outdoor stage. So for the first time, we produced 6 bands over 2 days, really well received. People kept coming up to me saying, this is just so wonderful. I feel like I'm normal again. I put pumpkins on the street, so that's how we figured out how to be able to socially distance people. And there's a picture there that Jenny put up, which is looking at the stage. There were a lot more people than that, but it was really fun to be able to do that. And it was a big success. We have now slowly pivoting to go back inside, and Ginny, you can probably show those inside pictures if you were able to grab any of those. We of course are limited by our, by the capacity restrictions of the guidelines. So that is the Chubb Theater. It does hold 1,300 seats in it, but believe it or not, if you look carefully, all of those seats with white markers, that's where people cannot sit. So all of those little dark places, that's where we can put 300 people. That's it. That's all that we can have. And we have done actually 1 performance in there, tribute band that we had a contract with, Cash Unchanged. It was a tribute band to Johnny Cash music. That's me when I am getting ready to take tickets. We do definitely want to protect everybody. And now this is me over at the this is at our Bank of New Hampshire stage. So we have really set up, markings on the floor to keep people 6 feet apart, limits on how many people can go in the bathrooms. I mean, all of that stuff has to be done to be able to have these indoor performances. We've done a couple of them inside the stage. This is our bar. You have to do this whole long walk around, and where you see that gentleman who's Steve Martin, he's coming with the pizzas, but you buy your drink and pay for your pizza, and then you follow another pathway out of this space and back to your seats. So again, we are working as hard as we can to make sure that and this is what the stage seating looks like with its socially distanced setup. We are currently operating off of the wonderful money that the Go for NERF funding provided, and our fundraising continues. I will say though that, as much as we are doing all that we can to, to keep ourselves going and to live stream bunch of things and to find slowly doing maybe one show a week in our smaller space. We are not going to be able to come back until, as Andrew pointed out, until our occupancy levels are brought back to regular size for the two facilities. And we have an audience willing to come out because, of course, again, even though that one show we had in our big theater, we only got 163 people that came, though we could have had 300. So our audience is not comfortable yet coming back. And for us, and this is the big sort of message that I would love to leave for whoever is listening, there is going to be a real hole because we all have budgeted at least some revenue off the stage. And as each day goes by and with what's happening nationally, I don't believe we are going to see our big tours back out until probably the fall of 2021. So how we actually make it through, and our loss between March and December was $1.25 million. So, you know, how we turn the corner, get through the early part of 2021, and then get to a point where we can start really booking on a regular basis and having people come out. It is going to be a slow climb, and we are going to need some additional help to do that. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Nicki. And I think, you know, this is the big question that we've all been talking about, you know, for quite some time now, that 2021, or the next fiscal year for some, could be significantly worse than 2020 was. And I'm interested in hearing from the rest of the panel about how you are preparing, you know, for kind of that eventuality. Now, you know, we heard today that it sounds like the House of Representatives has a new bill, and we'll see what happens in Washington. But, you know, how I loved what Reagan said about, you know, that we can always go back to our budget, and we know that our operating budgets are living documents, and they, you know, they change and they morph. Even in the best of times, there are changes that occur. So, you know, how are you thinking about either this next fiscal year or 2021 in terms of your operations and your financial viability? And any one of you can just jump right in here.
Well, I can speak to how we're adjusting. Again, we are like, as an organization, we, instead of releasing an entire season's worth of programming, we're now releasing information on a quarterly basis so that we can respond to the changing situation at hand. We don't want, we realize and recognize that we're all learning as we move forward, our audiences as well as our artists and our organization, how to respond to this. But, you know, fundamentally, what is going to have, and Nicki mentioned it as well, is that, you know, funding. When we were asked to apply for funding back in the spring, we had to make guesstimates about how much we were going to lose, what our projected revenue was coming in. And, you know, even at what I thought was a very conservative amount, or in terms of an ask, you know, I didn't ask for enough. And I think lots of organizations didn't ask probably for enough, because none of us could really anticipate this. So any support we can get from local officials at the state and the federal level as well in terms of funding is going to be a significant impact. The other aspect is to really to be very conservative in how we move forward. We changed our programming to things that could accommodate the guidelines, 1 or 2 or 3 person plays. We've been doing plays that we have to pay rights for. We're encouraging our organizations now to generate their own content, because, you know, if you make back the license, yes, it's paying an artist who wrote the projects, you know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but they don't live locally. And we're trying to keep the money locally as much as possible. So we're encouraging artists to take, and artists have always used constraint as a way to get to create the best art. You know, when you're backed into a corner, you get the most creative. And I think we're seeing that now. And use those constraints in a way that meet your mission, that satisfy the needs and desires of your audiences, and try to work through the process in a transparent way so that audience members know what they're going to be experiencing when they walk in the door. Because it's very easy, and I wish I knew who said this, but it takes a long time to build a great reputation, and yet it only takes 1 minute to destroy it. And so in some ways, don't pivot too quickly. Take time to reflect. Take the opportunity to work with people and find new ways of doing similar things, but don't take that deep leap off the cliff and spend all that money that you really ought to hold on to for when you have to close in January and February if we see an uptick in numbers. We hope that that doesn't happen, but again, plan for the worst, hope for the best, but plan for the worst type of situation.
I can jump in that as well. So we created a budget for 2021 that's a flipped budget where normally 60% earned and 40% contributed. It's not only flipped, it's aggressively so. So we're assuming for 2021 we'll probably be at 30% earned revenue, 70% contributed, and making sure that we've created a budget that will work with that expectation. Of course, as we all know, our board is the same. We approach the board the same way looking at budgets, is that we're not sure what will happen and what that timeline will really be, and if our expectations are accurate at this point. So, but having those expectations in mind going into the year. And the same thing, you were speaking earlier, one of the panelists, about partnerships with other organizations. And I think that that's key in finding what our strengths are and what we have to offer. And, several of us, we have venues that are being underutilized right now. So for the Children's Museum, reaching out to various superintendents from area schools and saying, is there a need now with your classes being virtual? Do you need space for something? Is it for a particular audience? Because we have space that is not being utilized several days a week. And so we had someone reach out just this week and say, yes, we desperately need a space for our English as a second language learners, a small group to meet with a teacher, but they can't have access to the school. So just trying to find ways that you can creatively use the assets that you have as an organization to support the community during this time. Similarly, someone who is renting a space for music and movement classes, that space is no longer available because that business is closed down. So wanting to know if we have a space that they could use for 1 hour a week for 8 children, so it's not a huge revenue generator. So don't, we're not solving the problem with these, but it's continuing to be a resource and making a little bit of earned income, a little bit of income in that way. So, we're all creative people here in New Hampshire, and we're all, that ingenuity that is needed to move on. So I think, that's the way we're approaching this as well, is being considerate about the decisions you're making, but really thinking out of the box about solutions and ways you can be there for the community during this time.
Absolutely. Anybody else on the panel want to jump in here?
I can echo both what the two previous speakers spoke about. One, we are actually being approached because we do have space that's not being utilized as much, particularly during the day. We have everything from the state legislature talking with us now about meeting in our building, which could work, to people who really do need to bring people together in real time, but need a bigger space now because the rooms that they would go to, say in hotels or anything like that, just aren't big enough. So we are finding funny little rental events, but it's okay. Well, we're being helpful to the community, and the same thing. I also think the time horizon, we are trying to be cautious and not go too far out, because we don't know what things may be coming at us. So, we're really sort of booking artists, and we are trying to book, and we can only really book sort of regional or artists who are close by, and it's really looking in 4 to 6 to 8 week horizons and not going too farther than that till we check on those conditions. So all that is part of feeding into, and it is, trying to this budget, I think, will be touched every single week because, and one of the things we obviously have instituted is a real check on our cash. So we've got a very elaborate now cash flow report that we run every Monday. So we know exactly, what money we can touch, because we're still sitting with hundreds of thousands, I'm not kidding you, of ticket money for shows that are now not until December 2021 or January 2022. So you don't want to spend those dollars when those shows haven't happened yet.
Yeah. Anybody else on the panel? We have a small enough group now that I think that if folks have questions for people on the panel, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Anybody have any questions? Panelists, do you have any questions for each other?
Well, I have a question. I'm Duncan Holloman from the New Hampshire Theater Project. And what I'm wondering about is whether the severity of the guidelines is in proportion to the risk that folks are going to undertake. Because I'm not sure they're calibrated appropriately, given what I'm understanding about where New Hampshire is with regard to positivity, what the risks actually are of being together and how all that works.
So I can actually jump in here a little bit on that. I attend the reopening task force meetings every week, and and I'm listening to the governor at his press conferences every week, and public health, and there is some concern, and other people are voicing concerns similar to yours, Duncan. I think that the argument that that the governor comes back with is that the reason that the case numbers in New Hampshire have remained so low is because of the the strictness of these guidelines. And so while certain guidelines are being relaxed slowly, there are others that that are holding fast right now. And the folks from public health echo this. So every week at that Thursday meeting of the reopening task force, one of the first things that happens is a report from public health. And so that's sort of the, that's kind of the official line, right? That the reason we're doing so well is because of these guidelines. Nicki, were you going to jump in?
Well, I would just say that I think there's evidence now, like that there were some producing theater companies, like the Barrington Theater in Massachusetts and a few others, who basically brought their people together and quarantined them, and made that same way the major sports teams are, made their bubble and kept people in it, and had some limited audiences, has sort of worked. I think for presenting theaters, I think it's when we open that back door to our theater and you've got people going, touring from Texas to Tennessee to then coming to New Hampshire, that's when, the risk it's really that way where I worry, because, there are new people that you're adding into the mix, and that's the nature of our business. So it makes it harder, I think, than people who have a group of people that are pretty contained. So I'd love to be able to have more people, but I will tell you that that number is right for our theater in terms of when even with 160 people, just the amount of crisscrossing and passing that people had to get to their seats, even though they were masked, all of that, you worry that with airflow inside these, these buildings, is it going to be enough? So I don't know. It's a quandary, definitely.
If I could follow up on what Nicki is saying, one of the concerns that came up amongst the guidelines after they were released was that the performing arts industry is in a contradictory position to the restaurant industry, where restaurants, people can sit at a table with people who they are probably not cohabitating with, remove their masks and talk continually. during the performance, whereas in a theater, you have everybody sitting facing the same direction and the entirety of your audience. I even made a spreadsheet, you know, that showed that 95% of the people in the theater are masked up compared to 5% of people in a restaurant. And the problem is getting people to respond to that. And so far, I have been unsuccessful getting anyone to say that's the hill that we want to die on, so to speak. It's very easy to shut us down and to keep us closed, and to not want to relax restrictions in our very controlled circumstances. And for small venues like Hatbox, it's much less of an issue. We don't have a huge group of people, and lots of the smaller venues and museums and things of that nature, crowd control is probably a lot easier than in a large venue like at the Capitol Center for the Arts, where you have constricted ways. Even in the Bank of New Hampshire stage, the hallways are pretty narrow, and trying to get people through in and out is a huge challenge. So not every organization, not every venue is the same. Every venue is going to have to be adjusted, and I think they're being cautious. I wish they would look at scale of response and perhaps give an opportunity to that. But right now, there's no clear defined way to get that response. You have to know somebody who's sitting in the office with the governor at this point, because the task force is not really taking up that question in the same way. You can provide public feedback. There is a public feedback option, but unless we do what we did at the beginning of this, which is bring a lot of us all together and push really firmly, you know, one or two calls does not really get responded to.
Any other questions?
At the Mount Kearsarge Indian Museum, I think that we have really seen a strong commitment to masks and social distancing, and people that come out are very appreciative of the fact that it's kind of a safe space where they can have an outing, but be encouraged and supported in social distancing and things like that. So I think that the vast majority of our visitors really have responded in a positive way to these outlined suggestions.
That is definitely a significant benefit. We have not received any pushback, even though we required mask wearing. And the people who have attended performances at first found it uncomfortable, but it's becoming more and more a part of the experience. And so I know we've been very appreciative of everyone's accommodations.
The same thing, people visiting the Children's Museum, everyone over the age of 24 months needs to wear a mask, and they're doing it, which is great to see. Also for us, thinking marketing wise, the decision to stay at a cap of 50 people when we could be higher than that was based on that's where we feel comfortable, but also we were looking at the visitorship numbers from other organizations like the Sea Science Center, the Seacoast Science Center, the Krista McAuliffe Shepherd Discovery Center. And they weren't seeing more than 50 visitors at a time during their time to ticket sessions. So we knew that that was basically the appetite right now for the sorts of experiences that we provide. And what we noticed is that a lot of organizations around the country will just say we have a reduced capacity, but we wanted to really say what that capacity number was, because, and people have really been commenting on that. So I don't know if any others do that, but when they say, oh, no more than 50 people, and they're like, oh, okay, because we've been there when there've been 400 people in the building. So we kind of have an idea of what 50 looks like. And that's something that people have commented on, because, you know, we're doing market research as people are coming in. Oh, why did you decide to come today? Or, you know, if you had a great experience, please post about it on our Facebook page, because I put a comment in the chat room about a great resource. It's Colleen Dillenschneider. She has a great blog where she shares data about perceptions of reopening of cultural entities and people's interest in visiting institutions after reopening. And the greatest predictor for a lot of folks in deciding what their comfort level is or when they're ready to return is seeing others that are doing so and having a positive experience. So it's almost like we had this discussion with our board. When do you jump in and just start that train rolling forward so you can build up that reputation. And I know it can go backwards instantly. I totally agree. And that's something we're very aware of. But is it almost like we're reopening our institution again, and you have to have one family tell another family, tell another family, tell their friends, and then you really start building that public confidence and trust again? So we can slowly work our way back to where we were before, versus closing completely and saying, see you in fall 2021. So
I think you're right in terms of that. I do feel like we are reopening as an organization again, you know, from almost from scratch. You know, that people really, they're cautious when they come. The number of people that have come up to me and said, oh, I'm just so relieved that everyone is wearing their masks and you've marked everything, and I can see the hand sanitizer, and it just is. And they do go and tell their friends, and, you know, hopefully it will start to build, but we're not there yet.
You know, I want to speak to something that Andrew said about the guideline process. And I was very interested last Thursday. The Retail Association presented an amendment to their guidelines to the task force, that retail establishments be given an option to go to 100% occupancy, with physical distancing still in place and all of those precautions still in place. And that's from 50%. That's where retail establishments have been. And the task force approved that, and it's now been sent to public health for vetting. And so, you know, as a creative community, maybe there is an opportunity to talk about offering some sort of a compromise measure like that to the task force. And so I've been thinking about that since last week, and wondering, you know, kind of wondering about it. And Nicki.
I'm just so curious, how can they be at 100% capacity and still keep 6 feet of social distance?
This is like the restaurants. It's the same thing as the restaurants. So the restaurants can go to certain 100% capacity, but there still has to be 6 feet between tables, or now barriers between tables. So you know, it is, a lot of it is semantics. But it's the idea of that 100% capacity.
I'd love to jump on what Jane said, though. I mean, I think it's making a strict decision to go, this is it and no more. At Hatbox, we have a fluid capacity based on the groups that come in, because they self-identify as a group of 4 or a group of 2, and setting a specific cap can add to that confidence level. And that's really the big question on everything. But I want to ask about another C word, and that's capturing that information and then being able to share it through your communications so that it can inspire confidence in others who maybe aren't aware that you're doing that. And I'm just curious how other organizations are sharing the good word about what they're doing and their reopening process to inspire confidence in others who have not yet returned.
Well, I can jump on that with us. Obviously, dealing with kids, everything, you're under a microscope like anything else, but it intensifies with kids. With us, I mean, we put out a plan for reopening even for the fall back in the summer before we even opened in summer, and we readjusted it. But we have just communicated, we've over communicated to our families, where we all hate this world. We're so busy. Too much over communication is a bad thing. We all hate too many emails, but we said we would rather them saying, hey, stop sending us emails, but we let them know how we were going to take care of every step of the way and show them the guidelines, how we have to have 30 minutes between classes and what we're doing in the studios between those 30 minutes, what our procedures are. We've had questions about some of our procedures. I took an hour with the family one day talking through them. They agreed with them. They just wanted to know. I didn't have an hour to talk to them, but if that meant they were comfortable, I knew that family would take that conversation and spread it to their friends whose kids are here. And so we just we went to the over communication route with it and just really put out there on all of our social media, emailed our students that are enrolled what we're doing so they knew. So when they come up and they're like, I didn't know this, we kind of laugh and go, I don't know how you didn't know this. I'm like, if you don't know this organization, you would have probably seen what we were doing by now.
No, I heard another story from another producing theater company who did go outside in a tent, and when they were asked, well, what was it that you forgot when and they'd forgotten to tell the neighbors around where this tent was going. And so that, of course, raised all sorts of questions like, why is this tent here? What kind of performances? Who's going to be there? Are they wearing masks? And so, they just learned their lesson that you just cannot communicate enough in this time period. And don't forget those, think through all the groups of people who might need to know that, this information, and do it at least twice. So.
Yeah. Other questions, comments?
It's hard to select public imagery too. The only negative feedback we've received was there was a photograph that ran in one of the papers that was a rehearsal that showed the actors without masks and too close together. And that was not something that had come across my desk. I hadn't seen it. And we got just one email, but that email was enough for me to contact every single one of our producers and say, it's really important that with any visual media that you're putting out, that you reflect the experience that the audience is going to have, because you run the risk of losing 100 people who don't come to your show because they believe that that's an accurate representation. And it's hard because we all spend so much time trying to capture pictures of smiling people packed in as tightly together as possible, because it shows that we're popular, and that, and that type of marketing is antithetical to the world we live in. So any type of communication, just looking at the visuals is so important. So.
Absolutely.
I was going to say that, yeah, that's what we did too, is we made sure that the top picture on our Facebook page is a family wearing masks. There is an under 24-month-old infant in there not wearing a mask, but it's a happy family. You can tell they're smiling under their masks in one of our exhibits, but they're the only family there because that's our limit, is one family per exhibit. So, but yeah, you have to make sure that all your visuals match your message, and you just keep putting the message out. Last week, it hasn't been published yet, but I actually did a what to expect when you come video, which a lot of other organizations have done in the museum, wearing my mask doing the video, of course. So I just keep hammering that point home, I think, continually. So, and then we do make an announcement during every session, 15 minutes before the session ends, saying, if you enjoyed your experience today, please, leave a comment on our Facebook page or tell your family and friends. So just to put it out there constantly.
Absolutely. Anything else for the good of the order today? Thank you all, panel. Thank you all so much for sharing your experience and your expertise. And we certainly appreciate your taking the time, and many thanks to everyone who attended. Hopefully the video for this session will be up on our YouTube in the next couple of days, and we'll do some social media around that so that more people can learn from today's session. So thank you all so much for being here. And please stay in touch. Keep us posted on what you're doing. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
Be
you.
well and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.